We're back on politics tonight, having a great discussion about world affairs with St. Xavier Professor Rob Shapiro and Bill Muck from North Central College. Let's turn to the rest of the world. A comment about Brexit. Boy, Theresa May, what a tough time she's been having, but looks like the options are difficult for Britain. They kind of want out. They put themselves in the situation, but Theresa May and others are kind of going, this is not smart, Rob.
Well, yeah, I mean, this has been a disaster for England. I mean, I think you're watching in some ways the disintegration of the Tory party. You may be watching the disintegration of the UK. And certainly this is a huge blow for Europe as a whole to have a major player. I mean, England was always, or Britain was always sort of half in, half out in the way they spoke about it. But they were a big player in Europe. And this is having an enormous impact. And there's a ripple effect all through Europe, which is really, really a terrible one.
What do you think happens here, Bill?
It's a great question, and we don't know. I mean, the United Kingdom historically has been cautious and patient and restrained in both their foreign and domestic governments, and now they're just taking risks. And the reality is, if they don't get an agreement done before the hard Brexit date, they become a completely sovereign, independent organization, completely separate from the EU, and that's terrible news for both the European Union and for the UK. But there appears to be recklessness within multiple members of Parliament where they're not really worried about that.
You know, we're having this discussion as though the world is fine, as though everything is moving. But I know both of you guys are very in touch with the fact that there is a global decline of democracy. Brazil, Poland, Hungary. Bill, what's going on?
So it's been a bad year for democracy. So there's a number of different measures of democracy, and we've seen a decline both in the newer democracies as well as the established democracies. You're seeing it in Europe, you're seeing it in Latin America, as you said, all over the world. And democracy is not something that we can just count on. It's something that has to be fought for. And what's most disturbing is that democratic declines are being pursued in democracies, and it's oftentimes the public that is electing officials who are then chipping away at those democratic norms.
And maybe we're not there really to help them when we talk about that here.
Well, I mean, the problem is a really big one because the really the ideal or the great example of democracy is the United States, and then became the European Union, which itself was another great example of democracy. And both of them are retreating in a way, retreating from democracy and retreating from the sort of the symbols of democracy. And if you don't have those as a kind of light, I mean, Lincoln talks about this in the Gettysburg Address, that this is the example. This is the last best hope. And if these examples fail, then you really don't have the impetus and the motive elsewhere in the world for people to maintain democratic institutions.
Rob, one way to bring this conversation home really is to say, look, strong relationships help the process, and we have trade wars going on with some folks who were key allies. What is the consequences of the trade wars?
Oh, it's bad. I mean, that we're picking fights with our allies. I mean, it's one thing to pick fights with your enemies or your adversaries. It's another thing to start arguing with your allies. And, you know, in some instances, the Trump administration has been successful with this. So I think they're, as in the case of NAFTA, so I don't think they're going to stop. I think they believe that it's working and that they're going to continue to do it. But the underlying erosion in the trust and the support, mutual support among these countries is definitely affected.
Bill, Trump supporters still support it.
There's a pattern here, right? So the Trump creates a crisis, creates tariffs. He calls himself the tariff man, creates a problem, and then he comes in and solves it, right? So it works politically for him, but I think to Rob's point, it really hurts us long term. We're talking about a relationship with Mexico and Canada. They have long-standing ties. You're burning those bridges. I think maybe the biggest, though, is China. Of all the stories we talk about, the relationship between the United States and China over the next 25 years will dictate global politics. And what we're seeing is the United States pushing that relationship and creating an adversarial dynamic there, which could have long-term implications.
All right, we've handled the world, but that's not the only thing you guys are experts in. You're also experts in the law. And coming up next, we're going to turn to the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh takes the bench despite all those accusations of harassment, a dramatic Senate showdown, plus how the court's rulings are changing the U.S., what we can look forward to next year. Stay with us.